Welcome to another episode of Getting Unstuck with Misfits Unplugged, celebrating the journey of career rebels who have overcome challenges, blazed their own path, and are coming out of the other side winning. Today we have Veralyn Gabriel. She is the Director of Career Services at Monroe University and the owner of Veralyn's Career Consulting Services, LLC. She holds a Bachelor's of Art in Psychology and Africana Studies from the University of Albany and a Master's of Art in Industrial Organizational Psychology from Brooklyn College. She has recently completed her Doctorate of Education in Teaching and Learning in Higher Education at Gwynedd Mercy University. Her dissertation, Seen But Not Heard, a qualitative study on the perceived career barriers among first-generation Afro-Caribbean women working in the U.S. education, examines the lived experience and perceived career barriers of Afro-Caribbean women navigating their career in education. Welcome, Dr. Gabriel.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Isabel and Brandy.
Of course. Well, so I'm gonna start first with before we get into all of your research and dissertation and all of that. I want our listeners to understand, first of all, where you're from because you have a very interesting dissertation that focuses a lot on Afro-Caribbean women. So, where are you from, and how did you get here?
Yes, so I'm originally from St. Lucia and I grew up in Brooklyn. So St. Lucia, the island, Brooklyn, made up of many islands. But that's part of why I'm here.
And so what started your journey onto your doctorate, and why did you choose um the thesis that you did?
Awesome. So the reason why I decided to do my doctorate in the first place is because I've never taken education for granted. I grew up with my grandmother. She was the last child of 17 children, and she couldn't go to school because her parents couldn't afford it. Because in the islands, you have to pay for school. So through her journey, it just encouraged me to always pursue the highest form of education that I could pursue. And then, as far as with my dissertation, this is my story. So it's part of my own growth and where I am to my career today. I always wanted to be who I needed. So just knowing my own story, I just wanted to research and see the how it also impacted other Afro-Caribbean women in the same kind of path that I went.
I love that you say that because it's something that Brandy and I stated when we created Misfits Unplugged that we wanted to be those like accountability partners or mentors that we didn't have in our career. So,
Mhm.
what lived experience do you have that kind of ignited you going in the direction of this dissertation?
Yes. So when I first started out in higher education, well, actually, let's backtrack a little bit. So when I first started out, even just pursuing my bachelor's degree, nobody in my family went to college and didn't even go to school in the US, period. So I had to kind of navigate a lot of those challenges on my own, just because they didn't have that experience to be able to relate to what I was doing. And then me choosing psychology on top of that really threw them off because in the islands they tell you either to become a doctor, a lawyer,
Mm.
those like really big high profile positions because they felt like that would create bigger social mobility. So with me even pursuing psychology was just like, what are you going to do with that? Until after I completed it, everyone's like, okay, well, you have to psychoanalyze me. I'm like, that's not what I did though. But that's a whole story for another day. But as far as with my career, I had to figure out what I wanted to do with psychology. And even just going to the big university, it was kind of hard to figure out where I fit in. And it wasn't until I took an industrial psychology class, I was like, this kind of combines my love for helping people and then helping people in the workplace, because I also know that I am very sensitive. So me going the therapist route was not a good decision for me. Although growing up, I always wanted to be a pediatrician because again, you got to become a doctor. So I was like, okay, I
Mhm.
want to help people. I'll become a doctor. I'll do all that. And so I took biology and realized I am completely allergic to anything to deal with science, those real hardcore science classes. So that's what made me decide, okay, I'll go into psychology. Still not quite sure what exactly I wanted to do. It wasn't until I went into my master's program and I did industrial psychology. At first, I wanted to be a consultant, but then since I am very young and I'm also young presenting, I just knew that there were going to be a lot of challenges as far as going in and telling people what they should be doing properly. And a lot of times, I know that when you go into organizations, they have an idea of why they're bringing you in and they want you to fit their narrative as opposed to actually coming in and solving those problems. So I decided, you know what, let me go the other route where I'm helping the workforce and helping them to be great performers, be able to have good professional growth, have all those things. So that's how I kind of came to career services. And even with that, I started out working in student affairs and then, okay, let me backtrack. So the reason why I even started in student affairs is because one of my friends just said, hey, just take all the civil service exams that you could possibly take. I'm like, okay, take it. And then I landed accidentally in student affairs. And with that, just being in that position, I was able to work with different departments within higher education. And then I got mentors within the career services department. They took me on. I was able to go over there and adjunct and learn all of the things with career services. And then I realized that that's my passion. That's what I want to do. And without those mentors, I wouldn't be here. So that's part of my whole journey with trying to make sure that I'm able to help the talent pool grow and just be the best that they can be.
Gotcha. Well, so I want to go back just a little bit to some of what you talked about in your dissertation, and it was a lot about conditioning and system barriers for women of color before they entered the workforce. So you talked a little bit about your journey and challenges. Where does institutional belonging, based on your dissertation, break down fastest for this group? Where?
I,
Mhm.
I would say definitely with visibility. In the Caribbean culture, for example, we just know to put our heads down, get the job done. But in the institution in the US, you have to be able to advocate for yourself. You have to be able to negotiate salary. But when there is nothing in place for individuals to know how to navigate that, it becomes a real barrier, especially when it comes to getting into leadership positions, for example. So I think that's the biggest disconnect, being able to really see the different. I mean, it's one thing to say you want diversity, but being able to really provide resources for that diversity to be able to really prosper in these environments, I think is key.
Gotcha.
So I would ask a question because I think about this as other women listening to this and doing a doctor's degree while having a full-time job and being an entrepreneur, which I just learned with your bio. How did you, well, first question would be, how did you manage all of those different competing priorities and try to show up for each of those areas and what they needed from you?
So I think the first thing was my mindset. I had to realize that there's no way I can give 100% to every single piece. So I kind of had to go with the peaks and valleys. So, for example, every Thursday I had an assignment due. My kids, I had to know that, okay, mommy can't play today. Mommy has to get her assignments done. And then it was also great that I had Dr. Shanique Rojas Hyman, who was also doing the program with me. She was my accountability partner. I think having an accountability partner is that was really, really helpful. And then I also had a super supportive boss who she would actually encourage Shanique and I to take a day off or two just to focus on school and just being able to kind of compartmentalize everything, just make sure that you're taking everything one step at a time and knowing that you cannot give 100% because otherwise you'll just lose your mind. So just trying your best, taking everything one step at every sorry, taking everything step by step, and
Hmm.
also relying on your resources, which is hard, especially as a Black woman, just knowing to be able to ask for help when you need it.
Shout out to your boss. Working for the right
Seriously.
organization and having that support makes all the difference of being able
Yes.
to show up appropriately to work and not burnt out because they are supporting you. So shout out
Hmm.
to him or her because they helped you on your
Her,
path, and we love to see that.
yes, Pamela.
It's so interesting because that's kind of how Isabel and I kind of grew a bond because we talk about this a little bit, but for the listeners who are just catching up or don't really know our story, is Isabel and I started out as colleagues at a financial services firm over 15 years ago, probably closer to 20 now. And we started out as co-directors of a specific department. And we obviously had chemistry right away, but what we really connected on was that we both were really, really goal oriented. And that accountability partner piece is where even the Misfits brand is sort of sits on, right? Because we understood how much of just supporting each other got us, so far. I mean, and if you just look at the trajectory from where we started to where we are now as, women of color and leaders in our own, way, a lot of that I can say sits on the back of just having that support and having that friend who has your back. I mean, and because we were co-directors, we were able to give each other a break. It was like when she was going through her master's, it was like, take a break. I'm going to hold down the department for a couple of days, right? Or finish your homework. I'll deal with this client. So
Yeah.
it's good that you were able to have that. That's awesome. Well, so then my next question goes into what does the future of career services look like based on your research and the contribution that you want to make in that space for women of color and obviously Afro-Latina women or Caribbean, I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay, I guess I'll start with the contribution. So, part of my plan is to develop future career advisors that are Afro-Caribbean because a lot of times you want to be able to see someone who looks like you and went through what you've gone through and they went over to the other side and be able to kind of pull you up and really mentor and groom you. So I want to do the train the trainer approach. And I also want to kind of do maybe salary negotiation workshops because all of the women that I interviewed, they were all highly educated, worked in education fields for over 10 plus years, and only about two or three of them said they had any experience with negotiating salaries. So, and we all know that women are already underpaid as it is compared
Mm-hmm.
to males. So I think just bringing that awareness is very important. And then as far as just the career services industry, it's not well known. Like I mentioned, I fell into it accidentally. Not a lot of people know that this is a career path that they can take. So I think just being able to inspire future career advisors and be able to kind of help other women with being able to advocate for themselves, especially with salaries and especially for leadership positions. I think that's my biggest contribution I would like to give.
And as we were going
Awesome.
through this rigorous program, what did you learn about yourself?
Hmm, that's deep. I would say I learned how strong I am to be able to manage and juggle all these priorities and even just being able to produce such a huge document and even being able to I didn't realize how important my research was until I actually interviewed those women and being able to hear their stories. They were just happy to find out that someone even wanted to hear what they wanted to say and what their experience was like. So I think those are my biggest takeaways.
Mhm. So in the, let's say, future realm of of the career service space, what resources do you think are needed that aren't there today that you might be able to, for some of our listeners, some of them are executives and people who are in position, to maybe help? What kind of resources would you say is really needed in that space?
Yeah, so after speaking to the women, a lot of them said that they would like to see more affinity groups, being able to have groups that are made up of multiple people, and especially with higher level executives, them being able to mentor and advocate as well for those who they see doing the hard work and not overlooking them. Because a lot of times they're doing the work, they're training the next people who's coming to be higher than them, but not necessarily seeing them. I think that's very, very important, that mentorship piece. And then also resources wise. Definitely, again, the salary negotiation piece, being able to,
Mm-hmm.
I think transparency is needed with salaries, because oftentimes some people are doing the same role and getting paid differently, and that disparity is ridiculous and
Mm-hmm.
needs to be
Mm-hmm.
addressed. And the only way we can address it is if we're transparent about it.
So you mentioned the focus group of women that you put together. How or did the educational system help you with the focus group? Like, how did you create the focus group to, or when you started, did you have the same intention when you ended? What you wanted to ask, the questions and the goal, how to support them? What did that look like?
Yeah. So, with the way I recruited my participants, I used social media groups that had professional groups that were either made up of education professions, people working in education, people who are of Afro-Caribbean background, people who are first generation. So I used about 7 Facebook groups, and then I also relied on my participants to be able to refer other women who met my criteria. So that's basically how I was able to get my 13. So with that, it wasn't necessarily a focus group, but they just had to meet the eligibility requirements of being Afro-Caribbean women, working in either K through 12 or higher education. Um, those were some of the things that they had to meet. And with that, and then since there isn't much research on this, I was able to be very broad. So I didn't focus on K through 12 or higher education. I just threw everything out there, and it ended up being an even split. So
Mm.
that was very interesting, and just hearing the commonalities, even though they were in different spaces. So I met with women who taught. I met with women in administration positions. So it was a variety of backgrounds, and I think they represented about 6 different Caribbean islands. So got a wide array of different voices. But I just wish I could hear more. But with qualitative, you have to kind of keep it more based on breadth than quantity. So that's part
Mm-hmm.
of, yeah.
I had a
Mm-hmm.
quick follow-up, Brandy, which,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, it was
Mm-hmm.
just, you reached out to strangers on the internet. So how did you overcome vulnerability or your own imposter syndrome of reaching out to these women and being vulnerable to what you were going through and why and your struggles to, how did you overcome that and get them to open up to share their stories with you?
Well, one thing about me, Shanika and I always laugh about this. I call myself Captain Shoot Your Shot. So I'm the type of person that
Okay.
will just throw it in the atmosphere and see what comes back.
Mm-hmm.
So it was more so me understanding the importance of me hearing their stories. So the vulnerability became easier, especially since I share the same background with them. And then even when I interviewed them, they felt more comfortable. The dialect had to come out, it came out. They didn't have to code switch. They were able to just be free, and it made the conversations flow a lot more easily. So I think that was an advantage. But it wasn't necessarily a challenge. It was more so like, oh, please, I hope I get to at least 10. So it's just a matter
Mm-hmm.
of will anybody really sign up for it? That was more my concern.
Hmm. So I'm curious just because I know that Isabel and I dealt with this in our sort of ascension to executive leadership, and I'm sure that some of the same remnants are happening maybe in a different way because we're a little bit older now. I'm curious when you're talking to these women, particularly in career services, or even asking the questions of your participants, how much of your coaching or research went into the psychology piece of being the only colored person in the room? I know, and I'm just assuming because once you get to an executive level, the faces that look like you become smaller and smaller, and so we kind of end up kind of being like the one in the room or among a couple. And I'm just curious, like, what your research and in talking to some of these people in career services, how that shows up for them and how your psychology maybe helped you get them over some of those barriers.
Awesome. So I didn't really help them get over their barriers yet. It was more so for them to share their experiences and what they faced. And it's just interesting that you said that because a lot of them said that some of them weren't even interested in being in leadership roles because they felt like they'd be the only face, especially in the K through 12 room. And
Mhm.
they also noticed that once, I'll give you an example. There was one participant where she was her colleague became her supervisor, and her colleague was color as well. But as soon as they switched over to the supervisory level, the whole dynamic changed. They felt like they had to prove a point as opposed to be that face as someone to go to and someone to look up to. So that became another level of being that only face in the room. And
Mhm.
another one also mentioned that anytime she saw another face that looked like hers, it was even if it was a stranger, she would just go up to them and be like, "Hi, like I see you." It was always like I always feeling like they had to kind of form some kind of bond with whoever kind of looked and shared that same kind of experience because it is something that is tough to navigate.
Mhm.
Thanks for
Interesting.
sharing that. Yeah, it's sad when you hear that when someone, reaches the leadership role and has the ability to make change or create a path for the people behind them. And it's kind of the mindset I have, not to say I haven't made a ton of mistakes along the way, but it's
Mhm.
always had the intention of creating a path for those behind me and how to support one another. So I'm glad that person was able to share that. I guess could be twofold question, but what if you were telling that manager that made the role, what advice would you give that manager to change their perspective to be a better example in what you've learned about what the future could hold?
The first thing I would say is to not look at others as a threat because that's what I took it as. They see you as a
Mhm.
threat and they work so hard to get into that seat, which was so hard in the first place. So everybody else they're looking at as a threat as opposed to being able to build a nice team to support you and have them come up as well. So I think it's more so being able to change your perspective and being able to think about, okay, put yourself in their shoes, which you were in not too long ago, and understand how that's how you build a team. You're not a one man army anyway. So it's better to help others thrive as opposed to shutting them out
Them
or
out or
making it more difficult for them.
Mhm. So interesting because Isabel and I built a whole framework around having people kind of go through like an audit of themselves to kind of figure out, what they wanted to do from a career perspective. And for those of you who want some of that framework, go back to the earlier episodes where we
Mhm.
talk about the ABCDs of Unstuck and all of that good stuff. But your research talks about identity negotiation. So how does a woman even begin to audit who she is professionally so that she can advocate for herself and what she's built? What advice would you give?
I would say the first step is finding out who your authentic self is. because oftentimes we have to code switch. We're always trying to kind of be chameleons, so to speak, to whatever spaces that we're in. And we're also always aiming to be in those spaces where we have to be chameleons. But I say try to be your most authentic self, and knowing that who you are brings something unique to the table. So, for example, Afro-Caribbean women are known to work extremely hard. So, um, I say think about your value, think about your strengths, what you can honestly bring to the table, and be able to show every side of you and not being afraid, because it's all about being fearful about how you're going to be perceived, how other people are going to respond to you, especially when you are just being your unique self. But just knowing that the only thing is that your personal self has to meet your professional self in between. So
Mhm.
of course, like when we go out, it's going to look differently than how you show up at work, but you have to be able to know who you are and stand firm on who you are.
Mhm.
And for someone who doesn't know maybe how to even identify where to start, so based off your research or your lived experience, women already and women of just women in general have a bunch of
Mhm.
insecurities and things that they carry and weights on their shoulders. But then you think of women of color, there's a whole different layer of struggle or baggage. And if someone doesn't even know where to start building that or recoding, I think is what you had said. So, how would you even recommend day one? Like, where do you start that conversation with yourself?
I think this is where mentors come into play. Just being able to reach out to someone, even if it's not necessarily someone in at work, but someone who you trust, someone who can hold up a mirror to you, and being able to at least start having those conversations. But definitely mentors, and that's why career services is also very important, because that we're trained to be able to tell you, okay, these are your strengths, these are your weaknesses, what is it that what's your ultimate goal? So I think just being able to reach out to and not being afraid to reach out to get that kind of feedback, and being able to hear from someone who might have gone through the same struggles and made it to the other side, or even being able to, again, being like an accountability partner, but you can't do it on your own, basically. You need to be able to reach out to have a mentor. And I always say, you need at work, you need to identify a mentor and a sponsor, someone who's going to really help you navigate different spaces, and the sponsor, someone who will reach out to others and help you to be seen.
Mhm. That's good. So, what's next for you, Doctor? What do you want to do? I know that I didn't even know, and as Isabel said, until we started this process, that you even are an entrepreneur. So, you want to talk about your business a little bit and what the future looks like for you?
Yes. So I actually started Veralyn's Career Consulting Services during COVID. I was working part-time at my current university, and I just wanted to basically do something where I'm strong. I'm very strong with doing resumes. I'm strong with helping individuals with their mock interviews, and just with honing in on their professional development. And I toyed around with an idea of another sector of my business, and I'm going to call it Island Gal Career, just to be able to speak to the Afro-Caribbean community, and do the train the trainer model, and having workshops. And I am pretty much open. I feel like the universe is very open, and I'm just taking it all in day by day
Mhm.
and seeing where everything leads. But I don't want to kind of just close off to everything. I want to see, I'm just gonna keep trying different things and seeing um where it leads me.
That's an
We
awesome
asked
place
you
to
a
be.
we asked you a
Mhm.
bunch of questions. Is there anything that you wanted our listeners to know more about you, or a message for anyone that, based off your learning and everything that you have accomplished to date, that you would want to share forward for the next generation?
Yeah, I think my biggest advice is just to show up as who you are. And for those of you who have already overcome all of these obstacles, just to be available and being able to just be supportive and just not being closed off. And even though you've made it, there's still someone who needs you to help bring them along. So I think that's why I want to leave them.
Good. Well, so before we sign off, why don't you tell people where they can find you if they, have questions for you based off of what you want to do?
Thank you. So I can be reached at Instagram. My handle is Veralyn_G. I can also be reached on Facebook under my name, Veralyn Gabriel, and I am willing and able to answer any questions as much as I can.
I do have one more question, and I'll flip this with your closing because I made Shanique answer this question, so I'll make you answer it as well. But if you can speak to the younger Vera Lynn, based off everything you accomplished and you just accomplishing your education, what would you tell her about this accomplishment where you've achieved in life?
That's deep. Well, my younger Veralyn was very shy and quiet, afraid of her voice. And I just want to share with her that now you have a voice, and now it's your responsibility to help amplify the voices of those who have not been heard. And this is a big accomplishment for not only you, but for your girls and for your family. And just keep pushing.
I love that. I love
You
that.
deserve it. You deserve your flowers.
Mhm. Well, that's a wrap, guys, for today's episode of Getting Unstuck with Misfits Unplugged. We're officially back for season 3, and we didn't come back just willy-nilly. We came back different. Behind the scenes, we've been building our own consultancy firm, and we're working on something very exciting for all those entrepreneurs and small business owners who need some fixing in their operations. We're calling it money leaks. And our diagnostic is not all the way out yet. We're looking for people to pilot. So if you are a career rebel who follows us, you are an entrepreneur, or even someone who's an executive or handles the operations at the job that you're at, comment money leaks below and you could become a person to pilot this new diagnostic when it becomes available. Follow us on all of our socials, Misfits Unplugged, across all platforms, and go back and look at some of those other episodes. You'll find if you're going through career struggles based on this episode and before, that we've got a lot of nuggets that you might be able to use in your career forward. Thank you, Career Rebels.
Thank you again, Vera Lynn, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm extremely honored.